The humid July air, thick enough to taste, clung to me as I stepped off the private charter plane onto the tarmac of the local international airport. It felt like a physical weight pressing down, a stark contrast to the dry, thin air of the hostile overseas region where I'd spent the last few grueling months on a private security detail. My duffel bag, slung over one shoulder, felt almost insignificant compared to the invisible burden of memories and experiences I carried back with me from that dangerous assignment. Finally, I was home, or so I thought. I navigated through the bustling arrival terminal, the cheerful chatter of reunited families and vacationers a jarring soundtrack to my own internal turmoil. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I pulled out my smartphone, my fingers fumbling slightly as I powered it on. A wave of notifications flooded the screen. My heart, already thumping with a mixture of exhaustion and anticipation, skipped a beat. I expected a message from Olivia, my wife of 12 years, a simple confirmation that she was on her way, perhaps an emoji conveying some semblance of warmth. Instead, a cold dread seeped into my bones as I read the series of messages from her on the chat app. Welcome back. A pause, as if for dramatic effect then. But there's no place for you in this house anymore. The locks have been changed. Another message followed swiftly. The children don't want to see you. And the final, brutal blow. It's over. My lawyer will be in touch. Beneath the stark, cruel words, a thumbnail preview of Olivia's latest social media post flickered, a brightly lit, champagne-fueled party scene, with her beaming beside a man I didn't recognize, Marcus Thorne. The image seemed to mock my own disheveled, weary state. I stood there, rooted to the spot in a forgotten corner of the arrivals hall, the vibrant chaos of the airport swirling around me like a distant dream. Fellow passengers streamed past, their faces alight with the joy of homecoming, their laughter echoing a happiness that felt a universe away from my own. The cold, impersonal words on the screen burned into my retinas, each syllable a fresh stab of betrayal. My mind, usually so quick to analyze and strategize, raced through a whirlwind of confused thoughts and fractured memories. Our last video call, just 3 weeks ago, had it seemed normal? Perhaps. Or had I been too preoccupied, too mired in the demands of my work to notice the subtle shifts, the growing coolness in her voice? Our conversations had certainly become more strained, more perfunctory over these past few months of my absence, but nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared me for this. This calculated cruelty. My thumbs hovered over the phone's keyboard, a maelstrom of angry, wounded responses flashing through my mind. Each one felt inadequate, too raw, too revealing of the gaping wound she had just inflicted. Instead, with a deliberate effort that drew on every ounce of my training, I typed just 2 words, the letters stark against the glowing screen. As you wish. Anyone who truly knew Julian Vance, who understood the depths of my composure, would recognize the quiet, simmering danger coiled within those deceptively simple words. During my time in the unit, I had earned a reputation for my unnerving calm, my calculated precision under extreme pressure. When chaos erupted, when other men succumbed to panic or rage, I grew still, focused, my mind a razor-sharp instrument. As you wish was the chillingly polite phrase I uttered before executing the most difficult, the most devastating operations, always with surgical, unwavering precision. It was a promise of controlled, inevitable action. I made a single, decisive call. The phone on the other end picked up on the second ring. Eleanor Shaw speaking. The voice was crisp, professional, exuding an air of competence and quiet authority. "It's Julian Vance," I said, my own voice sounding rougher, more gravelly than usual, even to my own ears. "I require your services, Miss Shaw, immediately." There was a brief pause, perhaps a flicker of surprise, before her calm reply came. "Julian, I thought you weren't due back until next week." "Plans changed," I stated, the understatement a bitter taste in my mouth. "Circumstances have accelerated." Can you meet today? I asked, needing to channel this raw energy into action, into a plan. For you, Julian? Absolutely. She responded without hesitation, a hint of warmth underlying her professional tone. My office. Shaw and Associates. Say 2 hours? I hailed a cab, the city lights blurring past the window. I directed the driver not to the familiar suburban house in North Carolina, the one filled with a decade of memories, the home where Olivia and our children, Ethan 16 and Sophia 14, supposedly no longer wanted me. Instead, I gave the address of a sleek, modern office building in downtown Charlotte, the headquarters of Eleanor Shaw, one of the most formidable divorce and corporate attorneys in the state. As the cab pulled away from the curb, I allowed myself one fleeting moment of raw, unadulterated emotion. I squeezed my eyes shut, the full weight of Olivia's betrayal washing over me in a suffocating wave, a potent cocktail of anger, disbelief, and a profound, aching sorrow. Then, just as I had done countless times in the face of enemy fire or imminent danger, I compartmentalized. I locked the pain away, deep inside. This was no longer a personal tragedy. It was a mission, and Julian Vance never failed a mission. Miss Shaw's office at Shaw and Associates law firm was a testament to both her success and her intimidating presence, all gleaming mahogany, brushed steel, and sharp, clean lines. The artwork was modern, abstract, challenging. The woman herself mirrored her surroundings. Eleanor Shaw was impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, her dark hair styled in a sophisticated cut that framed a face with intelligent, discerning eyes. Those eyes, I knew from David's prior dealings with her, missed nothing calculating your worth, your resolve, the moment you stepped into her domain. So, she began, leaning back in her large leather chair, her gaze steady and direct after I had laid out the stark, brutal facts of my homecoming. Her composure was absolute, betraying no shock, only a focused intensity. She waited until you were literally stepping onto U.S. soil after months in a high-risk zone to deliver this news? Via text message. A small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. That's remarkably cold, Julian. Even by the rather colorful standards I often encounter in this line of work. I need to understand the full scope of what I'm dealing with, Miss Shaw, I said, my voice low and even, the earlier tremor gone. Every angle, every potential pitfall. And then, I need options. Clear, actionable options. The ghost of a smile touched Ms. Shaw's lips, a smile that was all predator, sharp and knowing. What precisely did you mean, Julian, when you texted Olivia as you wish? She had honed in on the core of it, as I knew she would. It meant I acknowledge her desire to end our marriage, I replied, meeting her gaze without flinching. But it will be on my terms, not hers, and certainly not on the terms of whoever that man in her picture is. Good, she said, her nod sharp and decisive. The weak ones, the ones who cling to sentiment, they try to salvage what is irreparably broken. They drag things out, causing more pain for everyone involved, especially the children. She paused, her eyes searching mine. You're not here to try and win her back, are you? No, I confirmed, the word flat, devoid of any lingering hope or sentimentality. That part of me had died in the airport terminal. I'm here to win, to protect my children, and secure what is rightfully mine. For the next hour, an hour that felt both like an eternity and a fleeting moment, we meticulously constructed the first phase of what Ms. Shaw, with a hint of grim satisfaction, termed the strategic offensive. David Miller, my oldest friend, and now a successful IT consultant, joined us by a secure video link, his calm presence and technical expertise already proving invaluable. He had been the one to recommend Ms. Shaw, having utilized her services himself some years ago during a complex business dispute. By the time I left her office, the city lights painting streaks across the darkening sky, I had signed a series of documents. These papers set in motion a cascade of financial and legal maneuvers, a precisely orchestrated sequence designed to be executed at exactly 9 a.m. the following morning. After checking into a sterile, anonymous hotel room, a temporary command center, I made my second crucial call. This one was to David, no longer on a formal video link, but as a friend. We had grown up together in a small town in Virginia, our bond forged in the crucible of shared childhood adventures and later, though in different branches, through the shared experience of military service. He had transitioned to civilian life 5 years ago, but the discipline and loyalty of the unit remained ingrained in him. "I need surveillance on my house, David," I explained, my voice tight as I relayed the gut-wrenching details of Olivia's message and the subsequent meeting with Ms. Shaw. "I need to know who's coming and going, everything." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line before David's voice, laced with a mixture of anger and concern, replied. "You think there's someone else involved, Julian? Already moved in?" he stated, his tone making it clear it was less a question and more a grim assumption. "I need confirmation, David," I said, my voice hard. "And details. All the details. The man in the photo with her on social media, Marcus Thorne. I need to know everything about him." "I'm on it," David replied without a moment's hesitation, his loyalty unwavering. "I'll set up a discreet watch. And Julian." "Damn it, brother, I'm so sorry. This is unbelievable." His sympathy, genuine and heartfelt, was a small crack in the armor I had so carefully constructed. By nightfall, my temporary, sterile hotel room felt like a cage. My phone, which had been chillingly silent from Olivia since her initial barrage, began to vibrate incessantly on the nightstand. Olivia. Each buzz was like a small electric shock. I let it go to voicemail, my jaw tight. Then came the flood of texts, each one more frantic, more accusatory than the last. "Julian, what in God's name did you do? Answer your damn phone. Now. You can't just disappear like this and freeze everything. This is insane." Her panic was a cold, distant satisfaction. At precisely 10:37 p.m., a new notification pinged. It was from David. He sent a series of photographs, crystal clear even in the dim evening light. They showed a sleek, midnight blue Audi, a car I didn't recognize, certainly not one of ours, parked boldly in my driveway. A subsequent photo captured a tall man, his hair expensively cut, his clothes reeking of money, exiting the vehicle. He was met at the front door not with surprise, but with an enthusiastic, almost possessive greeting from Olivia. The final, damning photo showed them embracing in the open doorway, not the hesitant, tentative greeting of new lovers, but the comfortable, practiced intimacy of an established, deeply entrenched relationship. David's accompanying message was brief, brutal in its conciseness. His name is Marcus Thorne. Confirmed. Labels himself a wellness entrepreneur, CEO of a company called Elysian Living. He's been a frequent visitor at your house, Julian. At least 6 times in the past 2 weeks, according to a neighbor I spoke with. Often stays late. The kids, they seem familiar with him. Too familiar. I set my phone down carefully on the cheap laminate desk, my hand surprisingly steady. The pieces of the puzzle, ugly and sharp-edged, were falling into place with sickening clarity. The depth of her deception, the audacity of her betrayal, it was breathtaking. Despite the turmoil, I slept soundly that night. It was the deep, untroubled sleep of a man who has faced the worst, absorbed the blow, and found a new, singular clarity of purpose. The mission was clear. At 9:17 a.m. the next morning, my phone erupted again, not with Olivia's increasingly hysterical calls, but with a new, unknown number. This time, it wasn't Olivia, but her lawyer, a man who introduced himself as Mr. Rutherford, his voice already several octaves too high, practically shrieking with indignation as he launched into a furious tirade. "Mr. Vance, you have absolutely no legal right to interfere with Mrs. Vance's personal trust fund in this manner," he bellowed. 19 missed calls from your wife, and then you pull a stunt like this? This is outrageous. This is nothing short of extortion, sir." His voice cracked with disbelief. "You can't possibly. This is unheard of." I listened impassively for a moment, then calmly ended the call, cutting him off mid-rant. I walked to the hotel window, pulling back the cheap curtain to look out at the indifferent cityscape below. A small, cold smile touched my lips. Phase 1 complete. My journey from a quiet, observant kid growing up on the outskirts of Richmond, Virginia, to an operator in the unit, one of the military's most elite and secretive special forces, was paved with an unusual combination of exceptional discipline, an innate tactical brilliance, and an almost obsessive need to understand complex systems. I was the youngest of 4 brothers, raised by a widowed father who instilled in us a fierce sense of self-reliance. While my brothers often relied on their brawn and boisterous personalities, I learned early that survival in any environment required strategy, patience, and precision. I met Olivia Stanford during my first leave after completing the grueling selection and training for the unit. She was attending Ashworth University's prestigious law school, a rare combination of dazzling intellect, fierce ambition, and a captivating charm that drew people to her like moths to a flame. She came from a wealthy, established New England family, a world away from my own upbringing. Our attraction was immediate, intense, and all-consuming. It felt like a force of nature. Within 6 short months, we were married. Her family, initially skeptical of her choice of a career military man from a vastly different background, grudgingly accepted our union, won over, I suspect, more by Olivia's unwavering determination than by any charm of my own. When Ethan was born, I was stateside, fortunate enough to be assigned as a tactical instructor at Fort Bradley. Those were good years, filled with a sense of purpose both at work and at home. Olivia began to build her promising law career, her sharp mind and relentless drive earning her early recognition, while I steadily moved up the ranks within the unit. After Sophia's birth, the deployments became longer, more frequent, and undeniably more dangerous. The world, it seemed, was an ever-expanding tapestry of conflict and instability. Each time I returned, a little more weathered, a little more distant, the invisible space between Olivia and me seemed to have grown, stretched thinner by time, worry, and the vastly different worlds we inhabited. During my second extended tour, a particularly brutal one in a forgotten corner of the globe, Olivia's father passed away. He left her a substantial trust fund, its terms and conditions notoriously complex, almost Byzantine in their construction, a reflection, perhaps, of his own intricate and often controlling personality. One critical condition stipulated that her spouse, me, could not directly access the principal or income without her explicit, notarized permission. Another, more arcane clause specified that if she were to divorce, the bulk of the funds would be held in a secondary trust, inaccessible to her directly until she either remarried or reached the age of 55. It was designed, her father had apparently told her, to protect her from fortune hunters. What Olivia didn't know, what even her father's team of expensive lawyers had seemingly overlooked in the dense legalese, was that I had spent years, often during the long, solitary hours of deployment, studying financial law and intricate trust structures. It was a peculiar hobby, I suppose, an intellectual exercise stemming from my tactical mind's obsession with understanding and deconstructing complex systems, whether they were enemy fortifications or convoluted legal documents. I had discovered a subtle, almost hidden loophole within the trust's charter. It pertained to the temporary reassignment of management rights and oversight in specific, narrowly defined circumstances, one of which was a demonstrable abandonment of marital domicile or a clear breach of spousal fiduciary duty by either party. By sending that cold, dismissive text message while I was actively in transit, returning from a hazardous deployment, and by changing the locks, effectively barring me from our shared home, Olivia had, with an almost breathtaking naivety, inadvertently triggered that very clause. I hadn't touched a single penny of her money, nor did I intend to. But with Miss Shaw's expert guidance, I had legally and effectively frozen the entire trust, preventing any withdrawals, transfers, or significant financial transactions until the matter of her breach could be formally addressed. Now, Miss Shaw said, her voice pulling me back to the present as I sat across from her polished desk in her office for our follow-up meeting the next day. David was present again, a quiet pillar of support in the corner of the room. Miss Shaw slid a sleek, unmarked folder across the gleaming surface towards me. "You were right to be suspicious, Julian," she said, her expression serious. "This Marcus Thorne isn't just your wife's lover. Their connection isn't new." She paused for emphasis. "They've known each other since before your marriage. He was, in fact, her ex-boyfriend from her undergraduate days at Ashworth, before she even started law school." I nodded slowly, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. The news, while shocking, didn't entirely surprise me. It added another layer of premeditation, of calculated deceit to Olivia's actions. Ms. Shaw continued, her voice precise and devoid of emotion as she laid out the initial findings from the preliminary background check she had commissioned. "The timing, based on initial credit card records we've managed to subpoena, discreetly obtained hotel charges, and restaurant receipts, indicates they reconnected approximately 18 months ago, shortly after you left for your last extended tour." 18 months. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. 18 months of clandestine meetings, whispered conversations, and shared intimacies. While I was navigating treacherous landscapes, dodging bullets, and watching friends, good men, pay the ultimate price, Olivia was meticulously, secretly, rebuilding her life with someone else. Someone who had apparently been waiting patiently in the wings for years. The sheer audacity of it, the profound disrespect, fueled a cold, controlled rage deep within me. "And my children?" I finally asked, my voice hoarse, betraying a flicker of the raw emotion I was struggling to contain. "Ethan and Sophia, they were the innocent casualties in this." Miss Shaw's expression softened, almost imperceptibly, a rare crack in her professional armor. "The preliminary information suggests that this Marcus Thorne has been actively cultivating a relationship with them, playing the role of the fun, generous uncle, it seems." She consulted her notes. "Weekend trips, expensive gifts, a new gaming console for Ethan, designer clothes for Sophia. The usual tactics of ingratiation. Your son, Ethan, appears to be resistant. His private social media, what little we could access, suggests a deep-seated anger and resentment directed at both Olivia and Thorne. Your daughter, Sophia, she appears more receptive, perhaps more easily swayed by the attention and material possessions." I absorbed this information, my jaw tightening until it ached. The thought of this stranger, this usurper, insidiously worming his way into my children's lives, buying their affection, was almost more than I could bear. "What about the house?" I asked, shifting the focus, needing to maintain some semblance of control. "Our home. Has she taken out any new mortgages, any lines of credit against it?" "No, nothing new on your primary residence," Ms. Shaw confirmed. "But there's something rather interesting about the property directly adjacent to yours, the one that backs onto your land." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "It was purchased by a shell company, one with clear financial ties to Marcus Thorne's Elysian Living, just 6 months ago. The timing is highly suggestive. It appears they might be planning to combine the properties, perhaps create some sort of larger estate." The disparate pieces clicked together in my mind with sudden, chilling clarity. This wasn't just a sordid affair, a midlife crisis, or a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a meticulously planned, long-term campaign, a complete replacement. Marcus Thorne wasn't just moving in on my wife. He was literally preparing to absorb my family, my home, my entire physical space. "They're nothing if not efficient," I remarked, my voice colder than I intended, laced with a bitterness that surprised even myself. "Most affairs, in my experience, are impulsive, messy, driven by immediate gratification. Miss Shaw agreed, her sharp eyes missing nothing of my reaction. This one. This has all the hallmarks of a carefully orchestrated operation. A hostile takeover, if you will. She leaned forward slightly. The good news, Julian, is that in their arrogance, in their haste, they've made mistakes. Potentially significant ones. Such as, I pressed, needing something tangible, some leverage in this unfolding nightmare. Such as, Mr. Thorne transferred a sum of $200,000 directly to Olivia 3 months ago. Funds which she then apparently used to extensively redecorate your marital home. That's marital property, Julian, significantly altered using funds provided by her paramour. That complicates things considerably in a divorce settlement, especially regarding asset division. Furthermore, she continued, she's been consistently paying all household expenses, utilities, even the mortgage, from your joint checking account, an account to which you have continued to deposit your earnings, all while actively maintaining this relationship. That demonstrates a clear breach of fiduciary duty. I nodded slowly, processing the implications. That's good, Miss Shaw. That's useful, but it's not enough. My voice was quiet but firm. I need you to find me something definitive, something that will give me undeniable leverage regarding the children. Their welfare is my paramount concern. Ms. Shaw raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. The courts in North Carolina, as you know, typically favor the mother in custody disputes, all other things being equal. The courts, I corrected, my gaze unwavering, favor stability, safety, and the well-being of the children above all else. That is the legal standard. Find me something, Miss Shaw. Find me irrefutable proof that Olivia, under the influence of this Marcus Thorne, can provide none of those things for Ethan and Sophia. As I left Ms. Shaw's impeccably ordered office, the weight of the city's late afternoon heat pressing down on me, my phone buzzed with an encrypted text from David. Got something, Julian. Something potentially big. Meet me at the usual place. I'll listen. The usual place was a small, unassuming diner on the outskirts of Charlotte, a relic of a bygone era, where David and I had often met during my infrequent leaves from the unit. It was discreet, out of the way, perfect for quiet conversations. As I pushed open the diner's worn wooden door, the smell of stale coffee and frying bacon hit me. I spotted David immediately, tucked away in a back booth, his posture still military straight despite his civilian attire. He looked up as I approached, his expression grim. How bad is it, David? I asked, sliding into the worn vinyl seat opposite him, my stomach churning with a mixture of dread and anticipation. Depends on your definition of bad, Julian, he replied, his voice low. He pushed a small, encrypted flash drive across the chipped Formica tabletop towards me. Your wife and her boyfriend, Marcus Thorne, they've been plotting a lot more than just playing house and redecorating. He leaned in, his voice dropping further. They're planning to relocate to Costa Rica. My blood ran cold. Costa Rica. There are property purchases under a newly formed LLC, inquiries made to exclusive international schools for the kids, flight itineraries being researched. Everything. When? I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. This was an escalation I hadn't anticipated. The timeline is aggressive, David said. Looks like they're aiming for next month, right after the new school year starts here in NC. Give it a few weeks to settle the kids, then poof. He shook his head. And the kids, from what I can gather from the peripheral data, they don't know yet. This is all being planned behind their backs too. I pocketed the flash drive, its small weight feeling impossibly heavy in my hand. How did you get this, David? I asked, knowing the answer would likely involve methods best left unspoken. David's smile was grim, without a trace of humor. Let's just say Mr. Marcus Thorne, for all his supposed business acumen and Elysian living branding, needs significantly better cybersecurity practices for his personal cloud accounts and network devices. His digital footprint is surprisingly sloppy. I nodded, my mind already racing, processing this new, alarming intelligence. My family wasn't just moving on without me. Olivia was planning to take my children, to disappear to another country, effectively severing my access to them. The coldness that had settled deep within me since reading Olivia's texts began to crystallize, to harden into something far more formidable, far more resolute. This was no longer just about a broken marriage or a financial settlement. This was about the future of my children. "I need one more thing from you, David," I said, my voice regaining its steady, determined edge. "Access to our home, my home." Not to confront them, I added quickly, seeing the flicker of concern in his eyes. "Not yet. Just to retrieve something. Something that belongs to me, something I should have taken with me." "What are you thinking?" David asked, his gaze steady, already calculating the risks. "Tonight," I replied. According to Thorne's publicly shared calendar, another security lapse, they're attending some charity gala downtown. A big, splashy affair. "And the kids?" Thorne's calendar notes indicate they'll be at his lake house, presumably with his housekeeper or some other minder. Out of the way. David studied my face, his expression unreadable for a long moment. "Julian, whatever you're planning, are you sure about this?" "It's necessary, David." I finished for him, my voice leaving no room for argument. "Are you with me on this, or not?" Our eyes locked in a moment of silent communication, the kind of understanding forged not in words, but in shared experiences, in the unspoken bonds of loyalty and trust built over years of friendship, tested in the crucible of shared hardships. "Always," David finally said, his voice firm, his gaze unwavering. "You know that. But remember who you are, Julian. Don't let this betrayal, change the core of you." My smile, I knew, didn't reach my eyes. It was a cold, humorless imitation of the real thing. "That's exactly what I'm counting on them forgetting, David. Who I am, and what I'm capable of." The house, a spacious, two-story colonial in an exclusive, tree-lined suburb of Charlotte, looked exactly as I remembered it from the outside. Familiar, sturdy, ours. Inside, however, everything had changed. It was like stepping into a stranger's life. Gone were the comfortable, well-worn leather couches I had carefully selected years ago, pieces that spoke of family, of shared moments, of a life lived. In their place stood sleek, impersonal modern furniture in cool, sterile grays and stark blues, pieces that looked like they belonged in a high-end design magazine, untouched by human hands. The family photos, a gallery of memories that had once adorned the walls, tracing the arc of our lives together, had been systematically removed. The walls were now hung with large, abstract art, bold slashes of color that felt aggressive, alien. It was as if Olivia, with a ruthless, almost surgical precision, had attempted to erase any and all evidence of our shared past, of my very existence within those walls. I moved silently, a ghost in my own home through the transformed, unfamiliar space. My training, the ingrained habits of stealth and observation, took over as I cataloged the changes with a detached, almost clinical precision. Each alteration was a fresh, small betrayal. In the home office, a room that had once been my sanctuary, filled with books and maps and the quiet hum of my computer, I found what I was looking for. Behind a particularly garish abstract painting, one I definitely didn't recognize was the hidden wall safe. The combination, I noted with a pang of something I couldn't quite name, was still Ethan's birthday. Some things, it seemed, even Olivia hadn't bothered to change. Inside the cool, dark interior of the safe was a small, fireproof box. It contained a few precious mementos: my grandfather's service medals from his time in the Second World War, a collection of commendations and documents from my own military career with the unit, and a single, sealed envelope, unassuming yet vitally important. I took only the envelope, its contents more valuable to me now than any medal or commendation. I left the rest untouched, a silent testament to a past she was so desperate to obliterate. As I turned to leave the desecrated office, my eyes fell upon something spread across Olivia's new minimalist desk, a set of architectural plans. My gut clenched. I photographed them carefully with my phone, capturing every detail. They were detailed, professional renderings for connecting our property with the house next door, Thorne's recently acquired property, creating one massive, sprawling estate. The plans were dated 14 months ago. 14 months. Just 4 months into my last, extended deployment. The premeditation, the sheer audacity of their long-term planning, stole my breath for a moment. Before leaving the house that no longer felt like mine, I made one last, painful stop. My children's rooms. Ethan's room, thankfully, remained much as I remembered it. A chaotic but comforting landscape of sports trophies, well-used gaming posters, and the general, organized chaos of a teenage boy's domain. On his desk, however, tucked behind a newer, flashier gaming monitor, was a framed photograph that made me pause, a sharp ache in my chest. It was a picture of Ethan and me, taken on a fishing trip to the Outer Banks 3 years ago. We were both grinning widely, holding up a respectable-sized flounder, the sun glinting off the water behind us. It was, I realized with a jolt, the only photograph of me remaining visible in the entire house. Sophia's room, in stark contrast, had been completely transformed. It was now decorated in sophisticated shades of lavender and silver, with new, trendy furniture that made it look more like a chic college student's apartment than the bedroom of a 14-year-old girl. The whimsical drawings and handmade crafts that had once adorned her walls were gone, replaced by art prints and fashion magazine tear-outs. On her new, oversized bulletin board, amidst concert ticket stubs and school awards, I spotted a recent photograph. Sophia, Olivia, and Marcus Thorne, all bundled up in ski gear, smiling brightly against a snowy mountain backdrop. They looked, to any casual observer, like a perfect, happy family unit. The image was another deliberate, painful stab to my heart. I left the house as silently and unobtrusively as I had entered. The set of house keys I had used, keys that, according to Olivia's scathing text, supposedly no longer worked. Keys David had confirmed were still active on the secondary lock system. I placed deliberately, almost defiantly, on the cold granite of the kitchen counter, right where Olivia, or perhaps Thorne, would be sure to find them. A small, silent message. A warning. The next morning, feeling the grit of sleeplessness behind my eyes despite the previous night's rest, I met with Isaac Reed. He was a former military intelligence officer, now a highly respected, if somewhat enigmatic, private investigator whom David had vouched for unequivocally. "I need everything you can find on Marcus Thorne," I explained, getting straight to the point. We sat in a discreet corner of a quiet coffee shop. The aroma of dark roast a welcome contrast to the previous night's stale air. "Not just the surface-level information, Mr. Reed. Not the polished corporate biography or the curated social media persona. I need to know what he's hiding, what skeletons are in his closet. Everyone has them." Isaac Reed, a slight, wiry man with watchful, penetrating eyes that seemed to miss nothing, nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "Everyone's hiding something, Mr. Vance," he agreed, his voice quiet, almost a whisper. "The trick is knowing where to look and how deep to dig." He took a slow sip of his black coffee. "How deep do you want me to go?" "All the way," I replied without hesitation. "Leave no stone unturned." While Mr. Reed began his meticulous, covert investigation into the life and dealings of Marcus Thorne, I executed the next phase of my own rapidly evolving plan. I contacted Ethan's lacrosse coach at Northwood Academy, his private school, a man I knew respected me from my previous, albeit infrequent, interactions. I arranged to, accidentally, run into my son after his afternoon practice, a casual encounter that wouldn't raise Olivia's suspicions. When Ethan emerged from the fieldhouse, flushed and sweaty from practice, he stopped dead in his tracks at the sight of me leaning casually against the bleachers. His lacrosse stick clattered to the asphalt. "Dad?" The single word was a mixture of shock, confusion, and something else. A flicker of hope? His teenage voice cracked, betraying the emotional turmoil churning beneath his carefully constructed aloofness. Mom, Mom said you weren't coming back, she said. I'm here, Ethan, I said simply, keeping my voice calm, gentle. My heart ached at the raw pain and uncertainty in his eyes. Ethan's face cycled through a rapid series of conflicting emotions: disbelief, a flash of anger, then a profound, weary confusion that mirrored my own. Where? Where have you been, Dad? He finally stammered, his gaze dropping to the ground. It's been 4 days. 4 days since you landed. We saw the news about your unit returning. I needed to get some things in order first, son, I explained, choosing my words carefully. Your mother. She made it abundantly clear that I wasn't welcome at home right now. Ethan kicked at a loose pebble on the ground, his shoulders hunched. He wouldn't meet my eyes. She said, she said you abandoned us, he mumbled, the words barely audible. That you chose the unit, your career, over us. Again. Is that why you didn't want to see me, Ethan? I asked softly, trying to keep the rising tide of anger towards Olivia from seeping into my voice. Did you tell her that? I never said that, Dad, Ethan replied, his head snapping up, his eyes flashing with a spark of his old defiance. I never said I didn't want to see you. She told us you wanted a clean break, he continued, his voice gaining a bit more strength. No messy goodbyes. That's what she said you wanted. I kept my expression neutral, a mask of calm I had perfected over years of practice, despite the fresh surge of rage that threatened to consume me. Olivia hadn't just betrayed me. She had actively, cruelly, poisoned my children against me with her lies. I see, I said quietly, the two words conveying a depth of understanding and a promise of retribution that Ethan was too young to fully grasp. Are you and Mom getting divorced? Ethan asked, his voice small again, the bravado fading. It seems that way, son, I admitted, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Ethan kicked at the ground again, his frustration palpable. Because of him? Because of Marcus Thorne? Partly, Ethan, I conceded. It's complicated. I hate him, Ethan muttered, his voice thick with a venom that surprised me. He acts like he's doing us all this huge favor, like he's some kind of savior, strutting around the house like he owns the place. He scowled. Sophia kind of buys into his act, all the fake charm and expensive gifts. But I don't. I see right through him. We talked for nearly 30 minutes, a fragile, tentative conversation. I was careful not to disparage Olivia directly, not to add more fuel to the fire of his adolescent anger. Instead, I focused on gently, patiently, establishing the truth that many of his assumptions, many of his hurts, were based on the calculated, manipulative lies his mother had fed him. Just as we were starting to reconnect, to find some common ground, Olivia's familiar SUV, a massive, gleaming status symbol, pulled aggressively into the school parking lot. I stood up, my brief respite over. I have to go, Ethan, I said, placing a hand on his shoulder. But listen to me. Whatever happens between your mother and me, whatever ugliness comes out, I am still your father. And Sophia's father. I looked him directly in the eyes. That will never, ever change. Do you understand? As I began to walk away, a heavy weight settling in my chest, Ethan called out after me, his voice raw with a desperate plea. Dad, are you just going to let him take everything? Our house? Us? I turned, my expression unreadable, a carefully constructed mask of impassivity. But beneath the surface, a cold, hard resolve was solidifying. No, son, I said, my voice quiet, but carrying an unmistakable weight of conviction. I'm not. Later that evening, as I sat alone in my sterile hotel room, the city lights a distant, indifferent glow, Isaac Reed delivered his preliminary findings on Marcus Thorne. His efficiency was impressive, his methods discreet. Marcus Thorne, on paper, presents as a legitimate, successful businessman. Mr. Reed began, his voice a low, precise monotone as he detailed his initial discoveries. His company, Elysian Living, specializes in high-end wellness retreats and lifestyle real estate developments. He has a clean public record, no obvious criminal history, and is generally well respected in certain social and business circles in Charlotte. He paused, taking a sip of water. But, as is often the case, Mr. Vance, the carefully curated public image doesn't quite match the less visible realities. There are inconsistencies, red flags. For instance, three of his former business partners in previous ventures suddenly, and rather inexplicably, sold their significant shares for pennies on the dollar, just before those ventures declared unexpected bankruptcy. They've all since signed non-disclosure agreements. Then there's a city building inspector who abruptly changed career paths, moving out of state, shortly after approving one of Thorne's more controversial Elysian Living development projects, a project that had previously faced significant zoning hurdles. And most interestingly, Mr. Reed continued, his sharp eyes meeting mine, there's a discernible, and rather disturbing, pattern of Mr. Thorne targeting wealthy, married women as primary investors or silent partners in his ventures, particularly women whose husbands are otherwise occupied, frequently absent. I leaned forward, my senses on high alert. Explain that pattern, Mr. Reed. He cultivates relationships with women whose husbands travel extensively for work, international business, specialized professions, even military deployments like your own, Mr. Vance, he elaborated, his tone still neutral, but the implications clear. He becomes their friend, their confidant, their sympathetic ear. Then, gradually, he transitions into the role of trusted business advisor, offering exclusive investment opportunities in his Elysian Living projects. Eventually, in many of these cases, the frequently absent husband becomes permanently absent. Divorce is the usual outcome, and Mr. Thorne remains, often with significant access to, or even control over, the family's wealth, channeled through the now divorced woman's investments in his ventures. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just an opportunistic affair, it was a modus operandi, a predatory playbook. And the planned move to Costa Rica? I asked, my voice tight, remembering David's discovery. What's his angle there? Mr. Reed's expression, usually so impassive, darkened almost imperceptibly. That's where the situation becomes significantly more concerning, Mr. Vance. Thorne does indeed own property in Costa Rica, in a rather remote, exclusive enclave. But our initial inquiries suggest he also has connections there to less savory enterprises, individuals and entities known for facilitating discreet financial transactions and offering a haven for those looking to disappear from existing financial or legal obligations in their home countries. He's planning to isolate her, I concluded, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. Get her, and more importantly, her money, out of the country, away from her family, her friends, away from the familiar U.S. legal and financial systems where she might have some recourse. That would be a logical inference, Mr. Vance, Mr. Reed replied. The timeline he appears to be working on is aggressive, very aggressive. The property transfer for your marital home, Mr. Vance, the sale to one of Thorne's holding companies is already in motion. It's scheduled to close in just 3 weeks. I nodded, a grim understanding dawning. That's why Olivia was so insistent on a quick, uncontested divorce. Why she needed me out of the picture so urgently. They're attempting to liquidate assets, convert them into a more portable form before disappearing off the grid. There's one more thing, Mr. Vance, Mr. Reed added, his gaze thoughtful. The sealed envelope you retrieved from your safe last night. You mentioned it was important. He paused. May I ask what was in it? Insurance, Mr. Reed, I replied, a small, cold smile touching my lips. A contingency plan. Something my father-in-law, a very shrewd and cautious man, insisted upon years ago. Something I suspected, even then, might prove necessary someday. The envelope contained meticulously documented proof of a private agreement I had made with Olivia's father, shortly before our wedding, and just before his untimely death. A promise, a gentleman's agreement, that in exchange for my willingly signing a prenuptial agreement that severely limited any claims I might have to Olivia's substantial family money and inheritance, he, in turn, would establish a separate, discreet trust. This trust was designed to hold and protect my own military earnings, my bonuses, and any investments I made during our marriage, safeguarding them specifically for me and for our future children in the unfortunate event of a divorce. The agreement had been properly drafted by his own attorneys, signed by all parties, and notarized. Crucially, however, at her father's insistence for privacy, it had never been formally filed or integrated with the main Stanford family trust documents. It was a side agreement, known only to a very few. This single piece of leverage, this forgotten promise from a dead man, combined with Mr. Reed's emerging findings about Thorne's predatory patterns, gave me exactly what I needed for the next, decisive phase of my counteroffensive. I picked up my phone and dialed Ms. Shaw. "I'm ready to make my move," I said, my voice calm, resolute. "Set up a meeting with Olivia and her lawyer for tomorrow afternoon. Tell them I'm prepared to discuss terms for unfreezing the trust." "They're already demanding it, Julian," Ms. Shaw warned, her voice brisk, professional. "Rutherford has called my office 3 times this morning, threatening injunctions, sanctions, everything short of a congressional hearing. Tell them I'm prepared to be reasonable, to discuss a comprehensive settlement," I instructed. "Conference room, your office, 2 p.m. tomorrow." "And if they refuse the meeting? If they insist on immediate, unconditional release of the funds?" Ms. Shaw asked, though I could hear the implicit understanding in her voice. "They won't refuse," I said confidently, a cold certainty settling over me. "Olivia, and by extension, Thorne, they have a timeline to keep, a very aggressive one. They can't afford a protracted legal battle right now. They'll come." The conference room at Shaw and Associates crackled with a palpable, icy tension. Olivia sat directly across the polished mahogany table from me, her once familiar face, a face I had loved, cherished, now a carefully constructed mask of cold disdain and simmering resentment. Her eyes, when they chanced to meet mine, were hard, unyielding. Beside her, her attorney, Mr. Rutherford, a portly man with silver hair and an air of cultivated outrage, fidgeted with his expensive fountain pen, projecting an aura of righteous indignation that felt utterly theatrical. Ms. Shaw, by stark contrast, appeared completely relaxed, almost amused, a slight, knowing smile playing on her lips as she observed the unfolding drama. "This is unconscionable harassment and blatant financial abuse, Ms. Shaw," Rutherford began, his voice booming in the otherwise silent room, clearly intending to intimidate. "Your client, Mr. Vance, has maliciously and illegally interfered with assets that are explicitly, unequivocally excluded from any claims related to marital property by a clear and binding prenuptial agreement." Ms. Shaw smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "My client, Mr. Rutherford," she replied, her voice calm, measured, yet carrying an undeniable edge of steel, "has simply exercised a legitimate, if perhaps obscure, legal option. An option, I might add, that was triggered directly by Mrs. Vance's own rather precipitous actions." She paused, letting her words hang in the air. "Perhaps if your client had demonstrated the common courtesy of waiting until Mr. Vance was actually home, perhaps even unpacked, before unilaterally changing the locks and summarily barring him from his legal residence and access to his children, we wouldn't find ourselves in this rather unfortunate situation." Olivia's eyes, narrowed to slits, flashed with anger. "You weren't supposed to be back for another week, Julian," she snapped. It was the first time she had directly addressed me since I'd entered the room, her voice tight, controlled, laced with an undercurrent of accusation, as if my early return was somehow my fault, an inconvenience to her carefully laid plans. "Deployment schedules change, Olivia," I replied evenly, my own voice a deliberate counterpoint to her agitation. It's the nature of my profession. Or rather, it was. I paused, letting my gaze rest on her. But your plans, it seems, were well underway regardless of my exact arrival date, weren't they? What plans is he talking about? Rutherford interjected hastily, looking flustered, clearly trying to regain control of the narrative. This is entirely irrelevant to the matter at hand, which is the immediate and unconditional unfreezing of Mrs. Vance's personal trust. Ignoring him, I slowly, deliberately, slid a thin folder across the polished table towards Olivia. Property purchases in a rather remote part of Costa Rica, Olivia, I said, my voice quiet, but carrying clearly in the tense silence. Applications to exclusive international schools for my children, Ethan and Sophia. One-way airline ticket confirmations. The color drained visibly from Olivia's face as she reluctantly opened the folder, her eyes scanning the documents within printouts of emails, property deeds, school enrollment forms, her composure beginning to crumble. How did you get these? She stammered, her voice barely a whisper, her carefully constructed mask of disdain cracking. You are actively planning to take my children, Ethan and Sophia Vance, out of the country, out of the jurisdiction of U.S. courts, without my knowledge or consent. I continued, my voice hardening, each word delivered with deliberate precision. In most jurisdictions, Olivia, that is referred to as parental kidnapping, a federal offense. It's a vacation property. Olivia snapped, rallying, a desperate edge to her voice. A place for the children and me too. To get away, to have a fresh start. Her eyes flashed defiantly. And besides, you've been absent for most of their lives anyway, Julian. Always choosing your precious unit, your missions, over your own family. My absence, Olivia, was in service to my country, I corrected, my voice dangerously quiet. A duty I undertook, a sacrifice I made, partly to provide for the very comfortable life you and our children have enjoyed. It was never, ever, an absence by choice. Olivia's carefully maintained composure finally shattered. The mask fell away, revealing the raw, bitter resentment that had clearly been festering for years. You had choices, Julian, she retorted, her voice rising, trembling with emotion. Every re-enlistment was a choice. Every dangerous, extended deployment was a choice you made. Every special assignment you volunteered for was a choice. Her eyes blazed with a fury that was startling in its intensity. You chose the unit. You chose the adrenaline. You chose that life over us. Over me. Every single damn time. And you, Olivia, I counted, my voice like ice, chose Marcus Thorne long before my last deployment even began. I let that sink in, watching the fight drain out of her, replaced by a flicker of fear. 14 months ago, to be precise, when you commissioned detailed architectural plans to physically connect our marital home with his adjacent property, while I was deployed, risking my life. Rutherford cleared his throat loudly, looking increasingly uncomfortable, clearly out of his depth. Perhaps, he blustered, perhaps we should all take a moment and try to focus on the immediate issue at hand. The resolution of this unfortunate misunderstanding regarding Mrs. Vance's trust fund. I will agree to unfreeze the trust, Olivia, I said, cutting through his attempted diversion, my gaze fixed on my wife. On two, and only two, non-negotiable conditions. Olivia's relief was palpable, a visible sagging of her shoulders. But it was short-lived, her eyes narrowing again with suspicion as I continued. First, the children, Ethan and Sophia, will remain here in Charlotte, in North Carolina. They will continue their education at Northwood Academy through the end of the current school year, at a minimum. We will implement a standard joint custody arrangement to be mutually agreed upon and legally formalized. There will be no international relocations, no extended vacations out of the country, without my explicit written consent and a formal court order. Rutherford, surprisingly, nodded quickly. That seems perfectly reasonable, Mr. Vance. Eminently fair under the circumstances. He was clearly eager to de-escalate, to find any path to resolving the immediate financial crisis. Second, I continued, my eyes still locked on Olivia. I want the unvarnished truth from you, Olivia. Not about your affair with Thorne. I have more than enough evidence of that already. I want the truth about what you told our children about me, about my return. Olivia's jaw tightened, a muscle pulsing angrily. I don't know what you're talking about, Julian. Oh, I think you do, Olivia, I said, my voice soft, almost gentle, but with an underlying current of cold fury. You told them I abandoned them. You told them I didn't want to see them. You told them I wanted a clean break, with no messy goodbyes. Those were your words, relayed to me by our son. I was trying to protect them. Olivia retorted, her voice rising again, defensive, shrill. I was trying to shield them from being hurt, from the uncertainty of your lifestyle. What was I supposed to say, Julian? Oh, don't worry, kids. Your father might come home in a body bag any day now, but let's all just keep our fingers crossed. You lied to them, Olivia, I said quietly, the accusation hanging heavy in the air. You deliberately, systematically, lied to our children to alienate them from me, to justify your own actions. Ethan never said he didn't want to see me. He told me that to my face. And I doubt Sophia did either. Not truly. Not before you and Thorne started your campaign of manipulation. That, Olivia, was your doing. Your calculated, cruel manipulation of our children's emotions. The room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. Even Rutherford looked troubled, his bluster deflated, as he glanced uneasily between Olivia and me. I want you to correct the record, Olivia, I continued, my voice regaining its firm, implacable tone. You will sit down with Ethan and Sophia, and you will tell them the complete, unvarnished truth about your affair, about your lies concerning me, about your plans to take them to Costa Rica. Everything. Then, and only then, can we discuss the terms for unfreezing your trust. And if I refuse? Olivia challenged, a spark of her old defiance returning, though her eyes were now filled with a dawning fear. If I tell you to go to hell? I reached into my briefcase and retrieved the sealed envelope I had taken from the safe, the one containing her father's promise. I slid it across the polished table towards her. Then this document, Olivia, I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. This legally binding agreement made between your father and myself gets filed with the trust administrators and the probate court first thing tomorrow morning. Your father, as you may recall, made certain promises to me, certain guarantees regarding my financial security and the well-being of our children. Promises that, under specific circumstances such as these, supersede even your rather comprehensive prenuptial protections. Olivia's face went white, ashen, as she tore open the envelope and read the document within, her hand trembling slightly. Dad would never. He wouldn't do this to me, she whispered, her voice choked with disbelief. Your father, Olivia, respected service and sacrifice, I said, my voice softening almost imperceptibly, a flicker of an old, almost forgotten affection for the man stirring within me. He also recognized, perhaps better than anyone, that you inherited not only his intelligence and ambition, but also his ruthless streak, his capacity for self-preservation at any cost. I paused, letting the weight of his foresight settle upon her. This document, Olivia, was his insurance policy, his way of ensuring that, even from beyond the grave, his grandchildren, my children, would be protected against exactly this kind of scenario. After a long, agonizing 30 seconds, a silence so profound I could hear the frantic beating of Olivia's heart, she nodded once, sharply. Defeated. Fine, she bit out, her voice brittle. Fine, Julian. I'll tell them. I'll tell them the truth. All of it. Her eyes, however, still blazed with a cold, unyielding fury. But this doesn't change anything, Julian. Not really. I'm still divorcing you. I still want you out of my life. I wouldn't have it any other way, Olivia, I replied coolly, a profound sense of relief and an equally profound sadness washing over me. Believe me, that evening, as I sat in the sterile quiet of my hotel room, a text message pinged on my phone. It was from Ethan. Mom told us about Everything. What really happened? A long pause, indicated by the typing bubble. Then another message. Why didn't you call us yourself, Dad? Why did you let us believe all that stuff? The pain and confusion in his words were a fresh stab to my already wounded heart. I typed back carefully. I needed to be certain, Ethan. Certain that I could actually be a part of your lives again, that I could protect you both, before I made any promises I couldn't keep. Are you back for good now, Dad? Came the hesitant response. No more deployments? Ever? Yes, Ethan, I replied, a sense of finality of a chapter irrevocably closed settling over me. No more deployments. I'm home for good now. Another long pause, then a message that made my chest tighten with a sudden, sharp pain. Sophia's really mad at Mom. And at him. She's crying in her room. Has been for hours. A fierce, protective anger surged through me, directed at Olivia, at Thorne, at the whole damn mess they had created. Tell her I'll see you both this weekend, Ethan. I texted back, my thumbs flying across the screen. My place. We'll figure things out. Together. You have a place, Dad? Ethan texted back, a note of surprise, and perhaps a tiny flicker of hope in his digital voice. I will by Saturday, son, I replied, a new sense of urgency, of purpose propelling me forward. I will by Saturday. The next phase of my operation, the securing of a stable, welcoming home for my children, was already accelerating, moving faster than even I had anticipated. I needed to secure a suitable residence, establish a sense of stability, of normalcy, for Ethan and Sophia as quickly as humanly possible. But first, there was one more crucial piece of the puzzle I needed to address. One more threat I needed to neutralize. Marcus Thorne. Isaac Reed's deeper, more covert investigation into Thorne's business dealings and personal history had begun to uncover a deeply concerning and potentially criminal pattern of behavior. Mr. Thorne's business model, Mr. Vance, Mr. Reed explained during our next clandestine meeting, his voice a low, dispassionate hum, appears to involve a rather sophisticated and likely illegal form of real estate and investment fraud. He establishes these shell companies, like Elysian Living, to purchase undervalued or distressed properties, often in desirable resort locations or up-and-coming urban areas. He then cosmetically improves them, inflates their values through manipulated appraisals and falsified pro forma income statements, and subsequently sells them or shares in them to investment groups. Groups that, more often than not, include his current romantic partners or, more insidiously, their family trusts. It's not technically illegal if all parties are fully informed, sophisticated investors, fully aware of the risks and the true nature of the investment. Mr. Reed continued, his eyes like chips of ice. But Thorne, it seems, has a habit of obscuring critical details, misrepresenting material facts, and essentially duping his partners into believing they're investing in secure, high-yield ventures, when in reality they're often little more than Potemkin villages, designed to enrich him while leaving his investors holding worthless assets. Our preliminary findings indicate that at least 3 of his previous romantic partners, all wealthy, recently divorced or widowed women, lost millions of dollars through his Elysian Living schemes before they realized what had happened. By then, of course, Thorne was long gone, and the money had vanished into a labyrinth of offshore accounts and untraceable transfers. And Olivia, your wife, Mr. Vance, Mr. Reed said, his voice softening almost imperceptibly, she has already, according to bank records we've managed to access, invested a staggering $1.2 million from her personal trust fund of money that was, until recently, frozen by your actions into Thorne's latest flagship development, the Serenity Springs Retreat in Costa Rica. My stomach clenched. $1.2 million. Money that was supposed to secure her future, our children's future. The Serenity Springs property, the physical land, it does exist, Mr. Vance, Mr. Reed confirmed. But the permits for development, the promised infrastructure, the projected rental income and resale values, they are, to put it mildly, smoke, and mirrors. Highly exaggerated, if not entirely fabricated. I processed this damning information, a cold, hard anger solidifying in my gut. Olivia hadn't just been unfaithful. She had been monumentally foolish, blinded by Thorne's charm and her own desperate desires. So, his ultimate plan, as you see it, Mr. Reed, I clarified, is to get her, and as much of her money as possible, down to Costa Rica, where U.S. financial regulations and legal oversight are significantly more lax. Precisely, Mr. Vance. Mr. Reed confirmed. Isolate her from her support network, lead her finances dry through the Serenity Springs investment, and then, when the money runs out, or she becomes too troublesome, he simply moves on to his next unsuspecting victim. And once there, with no independent resources, no local connections, and a rapidly dwindling bank account, I finished. The grim picture completing itself in my mind, she would be completely, utterly dependent on him. Trapped. For the first time since this nightmare began, a flicker of genuine concern for Olivia, for the mother of my children, managed to penetrate the layers of my anger and betrayal. Despite everything she had done, despite the unimaginable pain she had inflicted, she was still Ethan and Sophia's mother. She had betrayed me, yes, thoroughly, unforgivably. But perhaps, just perhaps, she was also being manipulated, conned, by someone equally, if not more, skilled at deception and emotional predation. I need evidence, Mr. Reed. I decided, my voice firm, resolute. Hard, irrefutable evidence. Evidence that will not only stand up in a U.S. court of law, but will also be compelling enough to trigger an immediate investigation by federal authorities, perhaps even international ones, given the Costa Rican connection. And I need to move quickly, before he can spirit her and her money out of the country. What exactly are you planning, Mr. Vance? Mr. Reed asked, his gaze steady, watchful. I'm planning, Mr. Reed, I replied, a cold, predatory smile touching my lips, a mirror of Ms. Schuss, to give Mr. Marcus Thorne exactly what he wants, or at least exactly what he thinks he wants. Marcus Thorne had built his life, his entire persona, on a foundation of calculated risks and a keenly honed ability to read people, to identify their deepest vulnerabilities and exploit them with a ruthless, almost artistic finesse. He prided himself on his charm, his persuasiveness, his power to manipulate. So, when I, Julian Vance, the inconvenient, unexpectedly resilient husband who was supposed to have been easily dispatched through a quick, clean, and financially advantageous divorce, requested a private meeting at his opulent downtown Elysian living office, his curiosity, I wagered, would overcome his natural caution. Mr. Vance, Thorne greeted me with an air of practiced, professional cordiality, rising smoothly from behind his massive, imposing desk of polished, dark wood and gleaming chrome. The office itself was a monument to ostentatious wealth and questionable taste, designed to intimidate and impress in equal measure. This is unexpected. I took a moment to study the man who had systematically dismantled my life, who had been sleeping with my wife, who was actively trying to steal my children and my home. He was tall, athletic in a well-maintained, expensive gym kind of way, but with a subtle softness around the edges, a hint of dissipation. He possessed the glib, practiced charm of a man thoroughly accustomed to getting his own way, a man who rarely encountered genuine opposition. I thought it was time we spoke directly, Mr. Thorne, I said, my voice calm, even. Man to man, as it were, without the lawyers present, at least for now. I appreciate that, Mr. Vance, Thorne replied, gesturing magnanimously towards one of the ridiculously oversized leather chairs that faced his desk. Though, to be frank, I'm not entirely sure what there is left to discuss. Olivia has made her decision quite clear, I believe. That's precisely why I'm here, I said, deliberately choosing to remain standing, subtly altering the power dynamic of the room. To acknowledge her decision, and to propose a practical, mutually beneficial solution that allows everyone to move forward with their lives. Thorne's carefully neutral expression didn't change, not by a flicker, but I saw his posture shift, almost imperceptibly. a subtle tensing of the shoulders. Interest peaked. "I'm listening, Mr. Vance," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "You want Olivia," I stated flatly, no emotion in my voice. "You clearly want my house, given the architectural plans I discovered." I paused, letting the implication of that discovery hang in the air. "And it seems you want to insinuate yourself into my family, into my children's lives. I've come to accept these realities," I continued, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. "But the current approach, Mr. Thorne, the legal wrangling, the inevitable court battles over assets and custody, it will drag on for months, possibly even years. It will be expensive, acrimonious, and emotionally draining for everyone involved, especially for Olivia and the children. Nobody truly wins in that scenario." "What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Vance?" Thorne asked, his eyes narrowed slightly, searching for the catch, the hidden agenda. "A clean break, Mr. Thorne," I said. "A swift, amicable resolution. I will sign over my interest in the house immediately. No contest. I will agree to Olivia's proposed divorce terms with only minor, reasonable adjustments regarding access to my children. I will even," I forced the words out, the effort costing me more than he could ever know, "publicly support your relationship with Olivia, for the sake of a smooth transition for the children. In exchange, I laid out my terms. I want guaranteed, unfettered access to Ethan and Sophia, clearly defined and legally binding, and a one-time financial settlement that accurately reflects my significant contributions to the marital assets and Olivia's future financial security over the past 12 years. Thorne studied me for a long, silent moment, his shrewd eyes probing, searching for the trap he clearly suspected was hidden beneath my surprisingly reasonable proposal. "That's surprisingly pragmatic, Mr. Vance," he finally said, a hint of genuine surprise in his voice. "Olivia described you as rather uncompromising, a man of rigid principles." "Military service, Mr. Thorne," I replied, my voice carefully neutral, "teaches you to recognize unwinnable battles. And, more importantly, it teaches you when to strategically reposition your forces to achieve a more favorable outcome elsewhere." "I see," Thorne said slowly, leaning back in his ostentatious chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. He was, I could tell, already calculating the financial benefits, the speed with which this could expedite his plans. "And what, precisely, would this financial settlement entail, Mr. Vance?" $2 million, I stated, the figure carefully chosen substantial enough to be taken seriously, but not so large as to be immediately dismissed as outrageous. A mere fraction, I assure you, of what prolonged, contentious litigation would ultimately cost you and Olivia in legal fees and emotional distress. "You seem very confident, Mr. Vance," Thorne noted, a slight edge to his voice, "about what protracted litigation would cost me." I shrugged, a deliberately casual gesture. "Let's just say I've done my research, Mr. Thorne, on everything and everyone involved." Something in my tone, a subtle inflection, a hint of something cold and dangerous beneath the surface, made Thorne pause. For a brief, almost imperceptible moment, a flicker of uncertainty, of unease, crossed his usually confident face. Then, just as quickly, his polished mask of self-assurance was back in place. "I'll need to discuss this proposal with Olivia, of course," he said smoothly. "Naturally," I agreed, my voice equally smooth. "But this offer, Mr. Thorne, is extremely time-sensitive. It's valid for 24 hours only." "That's not a great deal of time for decisions of this magnitude, Mr. Vance," Thorne countered, a hint of his usual arrogance returning. "I thought you were a man who understood the value of moving quickly on lucrative opportunities, Mr. Thorne," I replied, turning to leave. "A man who seized his chances when they presented themselves." After I left Thorne's office, he immediately, as I had anticipated, called Olivia, relaying the details of our conversation, his voice, I imagined, filled with triumph and a touch of smug satisfaction at my apparent capitulation. Unknown to either of them, however, Isaac Reed, with the discreet assistance of a disgruntled building maintenance worker who, as luck would have it, owed David a significant favor from years past, had managed to install sophisticated, unobtrusive surveillance equipment in Thorne's office the previous night. The audio quality was pristine. "He's desperate, Olivia. Can you believe it?" Thorne crowed to Olivia over the speakerphone, his voice captured perfectly by Mr. Reed's strategically placed device. The great Julian Vance, the war hero, practically begging for a settlement. "This is perfect. Absolutely perfect. We can wrap everything up cleanly, get the money transferred, and be sipping cocktails by the pool at Serenity Springs before the first snow falls back here." It, it seems too easy, Marcus. Olivia's voice replied, hesitant, a note of unease in her tone. "Julian doesn't just give up. Not like this. He's not the type." "Oh, please, Olivia." Thorne scoffed dismissively. "He's a soldier, a grunt. He's not a businessman, not a strategist in this world. He's completely out of his depth here, and he knows it." "You don't know him like I do, Marcus," Olivia insisted, a flicker of her old knowledge of me, of my true nature, surfacing. "He's playing some kind of angle. I can feel it." "Even if he is, my dear," Thorne responded, his voice dripping with condescension, "what can he possibly do now? The trust is unfrozen, thanks to his generosity. The house sale is proceeding smoothly. We have everything in motion. He's already conceded defeat." "What about the children, Marcus?" Olivia asked, her voice small, a hint of maternal concern finally breaking through. "The custody arrangement he's proposing." "We'll honor the custody arrangement, of course, my love," Thorne purred, his insincerity almost palpable even through the recording. "Until we're ready to leave for Costa Rica, that is. By then, he'll be established in his new, pathetic little life, and the children, naturally, will much prefer our situation, our lifestyle, especially with the superior private school options available at Serenity Springs." He chuckled, a low, unpleasant sound. "And if he tries to contest the international move once we're gone, by then, darling, it will be far too late. Different country, different rules. He'll have no recourse. Trust me, Olivia," Thorne concluded, his voice oozing false reassurance. "This is what we've been working towards for so long. Everything is finally, beautifully, falling into place." The recording captured everything with chilling clarity. The casual, cynical conspiracy to violate any future custody agreements, the calculated emotional manipulation of Olivia, and most damningly, the clear, unambiguous intent to defraud her, and by extension, our children, through the Serenity Springs Costa Rican investment scheme. It was precisely the leverage I needed. The smoking gun. The next day, as expected, I received a call from Thorne, formally accepting my terms. A meeting was scheduled at his office for the following morning, ostensibly to sign the preliminary paperwork. That evening, I met with Ms. Shaw one last time to finalize our countermove, our endgame. "This is thin ice you're skating on, Julian. Legally speaking," Ms. Shaw warned, her brow furrowed as she reviewed the detailed plan we had constructed. The recording from Thorne's office. A judge might view its acquisition as entrapment, or at the very least, as inadmissible due to privacy violations, depending on how it was obtained. "The recording, Miss Shaw, is merely insurance," I assured her, my voice calm, confident. "A psychological tool, if you will. The real power lies in the financial evidence Mr. Reed has meticulously compiled. The documented pattern of investment fraud, the systematically misrepresented assets, the trail of bilked investors. We just needed Thorne to clearly, unequivocally confirm his intentions regarding my children and the Costa Rican scheme in his own words. And he did." "And you're absolutely sure you want to offer Olivia a way out of this? A chance to cooperate, to potentially mitigate her own culpability?" Miss Shaw asked, her sharp gaze searching mine. "After everything she's done to you, to your family?" My expression hardened. The memory of Olivia's betrayal, her cruelty, still a raw, open wound. "This isn't about Olivia anymore, Miss Shaw," I said, my voice flat, devoid of any lingering sentiment. "Not primarily. This is about protecting my children. Protecting them from both of them, if necessary." and ensuring that Thorne faces the full consequences of his actions. The pieces were set. All players were in position. Phase 3, the final act, would begin at precisely 9 a.m. the next day, exactly when Marcus Thorne believed he was cementing his ultimate victory, his final, triumphant conquest.